I wasn't supposed to be there. That night, according to her, I was meant to be at home, finishing the drywall patch in the guest room, while she attended her co-worker's anniversary celebration alone. She said it would be boring and all work people, and that I wouldn't know anyone anyway. But I knew enough. I knew the party wasn't just for her boss's retirement like she claimed. I knew Everett, the man whose name she never spoke around me, would be there. And I knew she didn't want me coming because he would be the one on her arm. So, no, I wasn't supposed to be there. But I walked in anyway. And I didn't come alone. I came with someone who made every head in the room pivot, including hers. Especially hers. She was wearing that crimson backless dress she claimed was too elegant for our usual date nights. Her golden earrings, the ones I bought for our anniversary last year, she said she lost them. They were dangling proudly from her ears as she laughed at something Everett whispered into her neck. Until she saw me. And the woman beside me. That was the exact second the music seemed to dull, like the air in the room thickened. Clarissa's smile faltered mid-laugh. Her eyes dropped from mine to the woman at my side, then back to me, as if trying to recalibrate reality. Everett followed her gaze, but the man had enough sense to step back. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Because this wasn't a confrontation. It was a reveal. And every detail, from the smirk I fought to hide, to the calmness I barely held on to the subtle squeeze from the woman beside me, had been carefully planned. 2 weeks earlier, I was nothing but a heartbroken man hunched over emails, reading the way my wife described me as a comfortable fallback, someone who doesn't challenge her anymore. She called me routine. Said Everett made her feel like danger. Danger. I once skipped a dentist appointment to drive her sick cat to the vet during a snowstorm. I stayed up nights with her when her father died. But none of that compared to some overpriced wine and late-night hotel bars, apparently. So I decided to make one change, one sharp, clean, quiet break from the man she thought I'd always be. Her shocked face tonight? That was just the beginning. And the beautiful woman next to me? Well, she wasn't there for revenge. She was there for the truth. I didn't expect her to stumble backward, but she did. Just one step. Her heel clipped the floor awkwardly, and the wine in her glass sloshed onto her wrist. She didn't even notice. She was frozen in that split second of disbelief. You know the look, like when someone sees a ghost of a decision they thought they buried. I've been that ghost for years, apparently. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just walked in beside Sloane. Yes, Sloane. That was the name of the woman I arrived with. Tall, quiet confidence, sharp cheekbones, and the kind of walk that said she wasn't there to compete, because she'd already won. She wasn't my girlfriend, by the way. Not my date either. Sloane was my mirror, a reflection of everything Clarissa said I lacked. Clarissa's lips twitched. Her eyes darted around like she was looking for a reset button, or a way out. And Everett? He suddenly had a deep interest in the hors d'oeuvres table. The moment didn't need a scene. It was the silence that stung. The crowd around them, co-workers, mutual friends, acquaintances, had caught on faster than I expected. Maybe they'd seen the affair bloom before I had. Maybe some of them even helped cover it. But now? No one said a word. No one came to her defense. Sloane leaned in, whispered just loud enough for Clarissa to hear. You didn't tell him you were married? That hit harder than anything I could have said. Clarissa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The party didn't stop, not exactly. It just reshaped. Conversations shifted to whispers. Heads turned, glanced, then quickly looked away when I met their gaze. Like I was the guy on fire, and they didn't want the sparks landing on them. I walked past her without breaking stride. That alone must have gutted her. Because the man who used to hold her coat, pull out her chair, cancel plans if she had a headache, didn't even acknowledge her with a nod. I led Sloane to the far side of the hall. We took seats near the open windows, far enough to create distance but close enough for her to watch everything unravel. Was that over the top? I asked Sloane, finally allowing myself to exhale. She tilted her head, her red curls falling over one shoulder. You didn't say a word. That's not over the top. That's elegant. I stared into my drink, heart pounding. I hadn't planned what came next. I hadn't really thought past the entrance. I just needed her to see. To feel what I felt all those nights she left me wondering if I was the crazy one. But now, watching her squirm in her own world of consequences, it didn't feel like victory. It felt unfamiliar. Like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Clarissa finally broke. She walked toward me, alone. Everett stayed rooted to his safe zone by the wine bar, pretending to be immersed in a conversation with a plant. She stopped 3 feet from our table, her voice small and too breathy. Can we talk? Sloane didn't even flinch. She took a sip of her drink, then turned her head ever so slightly, as if giving me space, without actually leaving. I looked up at my wife. My wife. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel married. I felt like a man watching a stranger wear his last name. "I don't think this is the place," I said, not harsh, not loud, just final. Clarissa glanced at Sloane again, then back at me, her lips trembling now. "Who is she?" I smiled faintly. "Someone who doesn't lie to the person who cares about her." She inhaled sharply like I'd slapped her. Her eyes darted again, searching the room for support, for allies. But there were none. Her audience had disappeared. She walked away. No more questions. No demands. Not even tears. But I knew the storm was only beginning, because she wasn't going to let this slide. Not Clarissa. Not the woman who spent months building her secret life and thought I'd never notice. And honestly, a part of me wanted her to come at me. Because for once, I was ready. She didn't come after me that night. That surprised me. Clarissa always had to have the last word, even if it meant dragging an argument through 3 different rooms and back again. But after I turned her down in front of everyone, after I sat back down beside Sloane like I hadn't just detonated a social grenade, she just vanished. Not literally, she was still at the party somewhere, but she removed herself from the spotlight like a performer who forgot her lines. Sloane and I didn't stay long. We made a few polite rounds, shook hands with people who clearly didn't know where to look, and left through the side door without saying goodbye. The cool air outside hit me like reality. The adrenaline had worn off, and I felt exposed, like I'd been standing on stage in my underwear and was only just realizing it. I'd made my move. Now I had no idea what would come next. Sloane drove. I didn't ask her to, she just did. She kept the music low, windows slightly cracked. We didn't speak for almost 10 minutes. Then she said, "You did something most people only fantasize about, Marshall." I looked over at her. "What, crashing a party and making a scene?" "No," she said, her eyes never leaving the road. "Taking your story back. Letting her feel what it's like to be on the outside." The silence afterward felt earned. Safe, even. I didn't know what Sloane's story was. She hadn't shared much, and I hadn't pried. But she understood the weight of being dismissed, of becoming invisible to someone you once trusted completely. I saw it in her face every time Clarissa's name came up. That night, when I got home, I found the bedroom light on. Clarissa was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in her red dress, makeup smeared just slightly. Her eyes looked tired, but her posture was sharp, upright, poised, rehearsed. She'd been waiting. "I didn't sleep with him," she said flatly. That was her opener. I didn't answer. I didn't sit down either. I just leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. She continued, "I was going to tell you. I was just waiting for the right time." "Right," I muttered. "Because surprise parties are the best time to humiliate your husband." She stood up then, fast, like I'd struck a nerve. "You humiliated yourself, Marshall. Walking in there with some woman like it was a movie stunt." "Don't," I said, louder than I intended. "Don't pretend you were the victim tonight." She blinked at me, stunned. I never raised my voice. Never. If there was one thing she could always count on, it was me staying calm even when it killed me. But something had shifted. I wasn't afraid of losing her anymore. Because deep down, I knew I already had. "What do you want me to say?" she asked, arms now folded like mine. That I got bored? That I needed something new? That maybe I felt more alive in 5 hotel lobbies with Everett than I have in 5 years of this? She gestured vaguely at the room, at me, at the dullness we'd let accumulate like dust. I shook my head slowly. "I don't want a performance, Clarissa. I want honesty. But not for me. For you. Because if you really think this all started because I wasn't exciting enough, then you've rewritten the past so much you probably believe it." She stared at me for a long moment, like she was deciding whether to throw something or cry. Instead, she just sank back down onto the bed and exhaled. "I don't even know when it started," she admitted quietly. "With Everett. With all of it. I just woke up one day and realized I didn't recognize who I was when I was with you anymore. And that scared me. It should have hurt. Maybe it did. But mostly, it confirmed everything I'd suspected. This wasn't about Everett. He was just the exit door. This was about her needing to become someone else and choosing to become that person without me. I left the room without saying another word. I slept in the guest bed. Or tried to. Mostly I stared at the ceiling, listening to the old pipes in the wall and wondering if that would be the last time we ever had a conversation as husband and wife. But I was wrong. Because the next morning, she was already packing. And what she left behind on the kitchen table was even colder than the air between us. The sound of a suitcase zipper cuts deeper than any insult. I stood in the hallway that morning, barefoot on cold tiles, listening to her move through the bedroom like she was checking out of a hotel. No hesitation, no dragging her feet. Just purposeful, steady packing, like this was always the plan. Maybe it had been. And maybe I was the last to know, as usual. I didn't step inside. I didn't ask her where she was going. I just watched the sunlight crawl across the hardwood as if it didn't care we were dismantling our lives in real time. When I finally walked into the kitchen, I saw it. The envelope. Cream-colored, thick paper, square edges, like something you'd expect at a wedding. She'd placed it dead center on the table like an offering, or maybe a warning. Beside it sat her favorite mug. Still half full. Still warm. I remember just standing there, arms limp at my sides, staring at that envelope like it might detonate. I opened it. Of course I did. How could I not? Inside was a letter. Handwritten. 3 full pages. And every word was so composed, so polished, it felt like she'd been writing it for weeks. Maybe months. She said she was sorry. But not for cheating, for drifting, for not communicating, for trying to evolve alone. She said she still respected me, still cared for me, but that our marriage had become a story she no longer recognized herself in. I had to reread that line 3 times just to make sure it wasn't a metaphor I was misinterpreting. But no, that was her version of closure. And then came the part that turned my stomach inside out. She wrote, "I saw the woman you brought to the party. She's stunning. And that look on your face, the one I haven't seen in years? That fire? Don't let that die again. Let her remind you of who you used to be." What kind of person writes that? Like she was handing me permission to be happy after she drained me bone dry and walked away? It wasn't kindness. It was control. It was her trying to write the ending for both of us, just like she always did. I didn't call her. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked outside and sat on the porch swing, holding that letter in my lap while the neighbors across the street watered their lawn like it was any other Tuesday. I remember thinking how absurd it all felt. How surreal it was that the person I built my life around could slip out of it so cleanly, so casually, leaving behind nothing but a note and the soft scent of her perfume still lingering on the couch. That night, I sat in bed and did something I hadn't done in months. I looked at myself. Really looked. The mirror didn't lie. I looked like a man who had tolerated too much. My shoulders slouched from years of trying not to make waves. My face was tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from trying so damn hard to stay someone else's idea of enough. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was exhausted. Hollowed out. I thought about Sloane. About how her presence had rattled Clarissa more than any speech I could have given. About the strange, quiet dignity in letting someone else fall apart in front of you without having to say a thing. But just when I was ready to start moving on, to breathe differently, maybe even smile without guilt, something happened that threw everything sideways. A knock at the door. Not loud. Not urgent. Just steady. It was 11:17 p.m. I opened it. And there she was. But not Clarissa. It was him. Everett. Standing on my porch like he'd lost his keys. Like he had every right to be there. Hands in his pockets and a look in his eyes that made my stomach churn. "Hey," he said, like we were old friends. "Mind if we talk for a minute?" And I swear to God, I forgot how to breathe. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, gripping the doorframe, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Everett, the man who helped dismantle my marriage like it was an old shed he found in someone's backyard, was standing on my porch like this was just some awkward misunderstanding between acquaintances. The nerve. The sheer gall. And somehow, I still couldn't move. My fingers tightened around the edge of the door, and for a second, I wondered if I was actually still asleep. If maybe I was trapped in one of those slow-motion nightmares where nothing makes sense and your voice doesn't work. "I won't stay long," he added, eyes shifting to the ground for a split second. I figured you deserved some kind of explanation." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and stepped aside without saying a word. Not because I wanted him in my house. Not because I wanted to hear anything he had to say, but because part of me needed to see if he would actually go through with it. If he would actually sit across from me and try to untangle the damage he'd done. He walked in slowly, looking around like he expected the place to look different now that he'd had a hand in breaking it. I led him into the living room, motioned to the chair opposite the couch, and sat down, my arms folded tightly, every nerve in my body screaming. He sat too, clasping his hands between his knees, leaning forward slightly like he wanted to get this over with fast. I could smell her perfume on his jacket, and that alone nearly set me off. I didn't plan for any of this, he started. I almost laughed out loud. Here we go, I thought. The cliches, the deflections, the careful wording of someone who wanted to be seen as a good guy who made a bad call. I said nothing, just stared at him, daring him to make it worse. Spoiler, he did. She told me you two were separated, that you'd been unhappy for years, that things were basically over, you were just dragging it out. He paused like that would justify anything. I didn't know she was still living here. I didn't know she was still telling you everything was fine. You didn't ask, I said quietly, my voice barely more than a whisper. You didn't want to know. He looked away, guilty, but not ashamed. That's when I realized something. Everett wasn't here because he regretted what he did. He was here because he was scared. Something had changed. Something happened. I tried to talk to her, he went on. After the party. She won't answer my calls. She left me a message saying she needed space. Said she had to deal with repercussions, whatever that means. I tilted my head slightly. So you came here to what? Asked me to pass her a note. No, he blinked hard, frustration slipping into his tone. No. I came here because she said something that made me think you should know. She said you had a plan. That you were never as naive as you looked. She thinks you orchestrated everything. The party, the woman, the public humiliation. And honestly, it rattled her. She thinks you're about to burn her life to the ground. I didn't flinch, but my heart pounded like a war drum. I'm not here to defend her, he added. But if you're planning to hurt her just to get even, you should know, she's spiraling. I saw her yesterday. She's not the same. For a moment, I stared at him in disbelief. The irony was unbearable. The man who took her from me, who helped her lie, who invaded my home without ever crossing the threshold, was now sitting on my couch asking me not to be cruel. She burned it all down herself. I said finally, steady and cold. I just stopped holding the hose. He had no answer for that. After a long silence, he stood. I just thought you should know. She's not doing well. I stood too, slowly. I'm not her caretaker anymore. He lingered for another breath, like he wanted to say something else, but thought better of it. Then he nodded, turned, and walked out the door without another word. I closed it behind him, locked it, and just stood there, forehead resting against the cool wood, letting the moment wash over me. She was unraveling. I should have felt relief. Victory. Something resembling satisfaction. But all I felt was an odd hollowness. Because I knew Clarissa, maybe better than anyone else ever would. And if she was spiraling now, it wasn't because she felt guilty. It was because she'd lost control. And knowing her, that meant she wasn't done yet. The days that followed felt like the waiting room of a storm. You know it's coming. You just don't know from which direction or how hard it'll hit. I went through the motions, eating bland cereal, answering emails I didn't care about, pretending I was okay when every shadow at the front window made my stomach tense. Everett's visit had stirred something. He wasn't there for closure. He was a warning shot. Clarissa was unraveling, and I didn't trust her not to pull something reckless. She didn't reach out. No calls, no texts. Not a single word since the party. That alone should have calmed me. But knowing Clarissa, silence wasn't peace, it was planning. She was the type who only went quiet when she was crafting her next move with precision. And I couldn't shake the feeling that her story wasn't finished yet, at least not the version she wanted the world to hear. I finally heard from her 5 days later. An email. Short, cold, precise. The subject line read, meeting. The message was even shorter. I need to collect the rest of my things. I'll be there Saturday. Please don't make it harder than it already is. No greeting. No apology. Not even a signature. I read it 4 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I was dissecting it for hidden intent. Don't make it harder than it already is. That wasn't a request. That was a warning. Clarissa never handled discomfort well. She'd rather shift the blame than own a consequence. And if she thought she could walk back into the house like it was a shared locker at a gym, she was about to be disappointed. Still, I agreed. Not in writing, just mentally. Fine. Let her come. Let her take what she thinks she needs. But I wouldn't be leaving the house, and I wouldn't be handing her my silence like a gift anymore. Saturday came like a drumroll. I didn't clean up. I didn't fluff pillows or make it look like I was living some new, glamorous life. I wanted her to see exactly what she left behind, quiet, stable, unadorned reality. The kind of life that doesn't flirt with chaos. The kind of life she never had the patience for. She arrived exactly at noon. Knocked twice, just like she always used to when she forgot her keys. Old reflexes die hard, I guess. I opened the door without a word and stepped aside. She wore sunglasses, though it was overcast, and a long gray coat that looked expensive. Her hair was straighter than usual, pulled tight at the back, like she was trying to iron herself into something she no longer was. "Thanks," she said, brushing past me without making eye contact. I followed her at a distance, arms crossed, watching her move through the house like a stranger. She barely paused, just started gathering boxes she'd left in the spare room. Shoes, photo albums, cosmetics she'd forgotten in the bathroom drawer. She was mechanical about it, like this was just another task on her list between errands. But then, she stepped into the bedroom and froze. She looked at the dresser, at the spot where her jewelry box used to be, at the nightstand where she kept a paperback she never finished, at the framed picture still hanging us, years ago, on a pier in Maine. Her expression changed for just a moment. Her posture faltered. I saw the crack. Then she covered it. "You could have taken this down," she said, motioning to the photo. I shrugged. "Didn't get around to it." She sighed, set the box down, and finally looked at me. Really looked. "I never meant for it to end like this." That line. That damn line. As if endings come with options. As if she hadn't shattered the floor under us and then acted surprised when I fell through. "Did you mean for it to end at all?" I asked. She didn't answer. Just looked away, ran her fingers along the edge of the dresser like she was searching for an anchor. "Everett came by," I said. That got her attention. Her head whipped back around, lips slightly parted. "What?" "Yeah. Wanted to let me know you were spiraling. That you were scared. That I might be planning something." She scoffed, eyes narrowing. "He's an idiot. You picked him." That hit. She winced, just slightly, then turned back to her box and kept packing. After a moment, she asked, "Are you?" "Am I what? Planning something?" I let the silence stretch just enough to make her nervous before I answered. "No. You're not worth the effort." Her hand trembled as she placed a candle into the box. I could see her fighting it, trying not to give me the satisfaction. But she wasn't in control anymore. Not of the room. Not of me. Not even of her own emotions. She finished packing in silence. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door, then without looking back, said, "You didn't deserve this." And then she was gone. For now. But I knew Clarissa. And I knew this wasn't the end. She didn't say goodbye when she shut the door. Just a dull click, quiet enough that if you weren't listening for it, you'd miss it. I stood there in the hallway, watching the spot where she'd been, wondering if I was supposed to feel something. Anger. Relief. Closure. But all I felt was anticipation. Because for all her polished exits and handwritten letters, Clarissa didn't walk away from things, not really. She pressed pause. She circled back. She reappeared when it served her. And I could sense it, like a dog catching the scent of a coming quake. She wasn't finished with me yet. I was right. 3 days later, I got a call from Human Resources at my office. A formal tone. A request for a meeting. "We've received a concern that needs to be addressed directly," the woman said. "Would you be available to come in tomorrow morning?" I asked what it was about. She wouldn't say. That sick, familiar coil twisted back into my gut. The next morning, I sat across from my supervisor and 2 HR reps, feeling like a defendant in a courtroom I didn't know I'd been summoned to. They said the complaint was anonymous but specific, that I'd created a hostile environment for a colleague, that someone had felt pressured and observed by me in ways that made them uncomfortable. I blinked. For a moment, my brain didn't register what they were saying. I asked who filed the complaint. They couldn't say. But one phrase in the write-up, a small, telling detail, cracked it open. The subject stares at female coworkers during lunch breaks and makes prolonged eye contact in silence. It was something Clarissa used to mock me about, my habit of zoning out when I was tired or anxious. She'd say it made people uncomfortable, that I hovered with my eyes. It had always felt cruel when she said it. But now? Now I knew exactly what she'd done. She'd used that trait, something she knew would stand out, and she'd turned it into a weapon. She'd filed the complaint herself or coached someone else to do it. It didn't matter. The point was clear. She was trying to control the narrative. If she couldn't make me look bad emotionally, she'd make me look untrustworthy professionally. I walked out of that office numb. I wasn't fired. Not yet. But they were watching me now. Every interaction. Every glance. Suddenly, I was hyper-aware of everything, where I stood, how long I talked to people, even the direction I faced in the elevator. Clarissa hadn't just hurt me. She'd poisoned the ground I stood on. I went home that night and sat in the dark for hours. I didn't turn on the lights. Didn't cook. Didn't speak to anyone. Just sat there, listening to the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak in the floorboards. My phone buzzed once, a message from Sloan. "You still upright over there?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want her dragged into this. And yet, when I looked out the window 20 minutes later, there she was, standing on my porch, holding a bag of takeout, her hair pulled back, no makeup, just that calm, steady presence I didn't realize I needed until she was already inside. She didn't ask questions. Just handed me a box of lo mein and sat across from me at the table like it was the most normal thing in the world. I told her everything. The party. The email. Everett. The HR complaint. Her face didn't shift. She just listened, every so often tilting her head or narrowing her eyes, but never interrupting. When I was finished, she pushed her food aside and leaned forward. "She's trying to ruin you," Sloan said, voice low, deliberate. "Not just punish you. Destroy you." "I know," I said. "And she's good at it." For a moment, we sat in silence again. Then Sloan reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I wasn't sure if I should bring this," she said. "But after what you just told me, I think you should see it." Inside the folder were printouts, screenshots, photos, names. Sloan had done research. Deep, methodical, surgical research. She'd found inconsistencies in Clarissa's timeline. Business trips that weren't real. Photos that were posted and then deleted. Hotel receipts tied to corporate cards but charged under aliases. It was all there, proof that Clarissa had been cheating far longer than I'd known, and not just with Everett. There were at least 2 others. One of them married. One of them someone I'd met once at a conference and shook hands with. My hands shook now. It wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. A cold, calculated double life stretched over years, maintained while she kissed me goodnight and laughed at my jokes and let me believe we were still figuring things out. This is unreal," I said, staring at the pages. "No," Sloan said. "This is war. You just didn't know you were drafted." That's when it hit me. Clarissa wasn't spiraling because of guilt. She was spiraling because the spotlight had shifted. Because she wasn't in control of the story anymore. And women like Clarissa? They don't crumble. They claw. And the next time she showed up at my door, she wouldn't be wearing sunglasses. She'd be wearing armor. She came back exactly a week later, not unannounced this time. Not subtle. Clarissa pulled up in a car that wasn't hers, stepped out in heels she probably hadn't worn since our last New Year's Eve party, and walked to the door like she still owned the floor under my feet. She didn't knock. She rang the bell once and stood back, clutching a leather folder to her chest like it was a shield. I watched her through the peephole for a full 30 seconds, just to make sure she was really here, really doing this, and then I opened the door. She looked thinner. Not weak, but tired in a way I'd never seen before. The kind of tired you only get when all your spinning plates finally crash to the ground, and you realize you have to sweep up the mess with your bare hands. Her lipstick was too dark. Her smile too forced. I didn't invite her in, and she didn't ask. "I just wanted to say something," she began, lifting her chin like she was forcing herself to stay in control. "And then I'll go." I nodded, silent. She waited, maybe hoping I'd offer her a seat or ask her how she was. I didn't. After a breath, she opened the folder and pulled out a stack of documents. "These are withdrawal forms." "The complaint at your work?" "It's being retracted. Officially. I made a mistake. I told someone to file it because I thought," she hesitated, swallowed hard. "I don't know what I thought. That if I could make you look worse than me, I'd feel less like the villain." I said nothing. "Not yet." She continued, rushing now. "There's also a letter to your HR department. And I've deleted everything else. The messages, the photos I had saved, anything I ever used to try and manipulate the situation." Her voice cracked slightly. "You didn't deserve that. You never did." I finally spoke. "Why now?" She blinked at me. The wind tugged at her coat. "Because for the first time, I'm not trying to win." We stood there for a long, breathless moment. Then I took the documents from her, flipped through them to confirm they were real. They were. She was giving up control. For once. "I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for," I said. "But I'm done being the man who holds the door open while you walk away with pieces of me." She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded, slowly, her shoulders dropping as if she finally understood that there was no going back. She turned to leave. I closed the door behind her before she reached the car. And that was it. There was no dramatic music. No slow-motion glance over the shoulder. Just quiet. A different kind of quiet this time. Not the empty silence of loss, but the peaceful stillness of release. Over the following weeks, things began to shift. The weight on my chest? Gone. The dread in my stomach every morning? Replaced by a strange lightness. I went back to work. HR confirmed the complaint had been dismissed completely. People stopped watching me like I was radioactive. Even the office air felt less heavy. And Sloane? She stayed. Not in the romantic way people might expect, not right away at least. We went for walks. Ate cheap sushi on her back patio. Laughed at each other's awful taste in movies. I told her I needed time, real time, to remember who I was before I bent myself into shapes trying to keep someone else happy. And she understood. She gave me space, but not distance. Presence, not pressure. That was new for me. Needed. Months passed. And then one night, while watching an old documentary we both pretended to care about, I reached for her hand. She looked over at me, smiled, not in a way that said, finally, but in a way that said, I'm still here. I didn't just survive Clarissa. I rebuilt from the ruins. Not louder, not flashier, but stronger. And for once, I wasn't the forgotten man in the background of someone else's story. I was the author. And this time, the ending was mine.